Welcome back to Most Amazing Top 10. I'm your host Taylor McWaters, and here are the top 10 scary real humans that might be skinwalkers. Number 10, Man of Medicine. Okay, before we dive into some tales of skinwalker sightings throughout history, we gotta make sure we know what exactly a skinwalker is, right? That kinda matters, I'd say. It's been referred to as a boogeyman for Native Americans. Native tribes all have different gods, trade unions, politics, you name it, so these skinwalker stories, they can vary quite a bit. More often than not, the skinwalker is a type of medicine man who can disguise themselves as an animal or shapeshift. Now the first story is short and sweet. Kick our list off, here we go. It's from a few years ago. It's an anonymous source, of course, as most of these are to protect their identity, and they say it moved like a toy rocking horse. What a way to start a story. Let's dive in. My uncle is Mexican and Native American. This happened in the desert in Southern California. He was driving around with his girlfriend late at night, and they saw something that looked like a huge black dog on the side of the road. He slowed down and the dog began crossing the road, but instead of walking like a normal dog would, this thing moved like a toy rocking horse. I don't even know what that means. That's terrifying to even imagine. He said it stopped in the middle of the road and stared right at them, and its eyes had a red glow. My uncle is the most badass person I know, and it scared the crap out of him. Well, that's how you know. Here we go, number 10, and we're already into it. Number 9, Skinwalker Ranch. We've heard of this one before on Most Amazing, but what are the roots behind Skinwalker Ranch? Of course, it's been the center of attention for alien activity, a lot of UFO conspiracies being located in eastern Utah, but more importantly, this land is said to be cursed, or the land's inhabited by a skinwalker. Terry Sherman owned the property back in 1996. He was walking his dogs around the farm late at night when he came upon a wolf, a massive wolf. A wolf 3 times the size of a regular one. Now keep in mind, he's probably seen a few living where he does. This massive wolf had glowing red eyes. Thing that spooked Terry the most and eventually made him sell the property were these voices. Yeah, Terry heard voices while walking his dogs often. Voices coming from nobody, it seemed. Sherman described that the sounds spoke in a language he didn't understand, which adds to the skinwalker theory. They came from the darkness. He felt like they wanted something. Yeah, I'd sell too, immediately. Gorgeous view, here you go, take it, I don't care, it's free, have it. Not for me. Voices? No way. Number 8, Thomas Winterton. So what happens next after you sell Skinwalker Ranch? Who moves in? Does anything else happen afterwards? Why, of course things happen afterwards. The ranch was sold to UFO fanatic Robert Bigelow for $200,000 in 1996. But after Bigelow sold the ranch later on to Adamantium, a steel company, things got intense. The voices returned. Now this time there was tons of surveillance equipment all over the property and more witnesses. There was cameras, alarm systems, infrared, you name it. If there's any voices, you'll hear it, or sometimes hopefully see it. If you've seen the movie Nope, this should all ring a bell. But apparently paranormal activity happens often here. Thomas Winterton, an employee of said steel company, he was interviewed and asked about the happenings, and he said, "I take my truck up the road, and as soon as I start to get closer, I start to get really scared. This feeling just takes over immediately, and then I hear this voice, as clear as you and me talking right now, that says, 'Stop, turn around.' So I lean out the window with my spotlight, and I start searching around, but I see nothing." Winterton and several other employees were hospitalized after experiencing skin inflammation and nausea while working on the ranch. To this day, they can't quite figure out what happened. Number 7, Campfire Sighting. From Redditor Out of Sight Dude, great name, this one's pretty juicy, here we go. While trading stories around a campfire, my friend recalled an encounter he had while serving an LDS mission. My friend's mission region had a reservation within its boundaries. However, it was relatively far from where he was serving. Now, on one occasion, him and his mission companion were asked to travel further than usual to meet with some investigators. Now, this took them near the reservation. On their way home, their car of course ran out of gas, and it wasn't until late at night until they were able to continue their journey home. This is like worst case scenario. I'm already so afraid. My friend chose a different route that took him through some back roads in an attempt to get home sooner, and he told us he was driving above the speed limit when he noticed movement in the woods lining the road. Well, because coyotes were common in the area, he took little notice at first, then he looked out the window and slammed on the brakes. The sudden stop jolted his companion awake, who immediately wanted to know what was going on. I looked down at the road next to the car and I saw 6 men running on all fours, keeping up with the car as I was driving 40 miles an hour. Number 6, Dads Don't Lie. From username Endulos, my dad isn't a bullshitter. What a great way to start a story. All right, I'm in. My dad isn't a bullshitter or a liar, so I know this story is true. So this was the early 80s, and my sister, who lived in Toronto, came down to visit her parents for a weekend. She was staying at a friend's house who loaned her a car so she could come out. Now, after her visit, she left a little after 9 p.m. She got maybe 7 or 8 miles away when the car just broke down. Okay, terrifying. Now thankfully she broke down in front or near a family friend's house, so she had aid. They let her in to call dad, and then dad came to pick her up. The family said she could leave the car in their driveway for the night, and my sister decided to just stay at my parents' for the night. Okay, cool, we're improvising. It was now a little after 10 p.m., dark November night, when my sister and dad are driving back to the house, and they pass through this heavily wooded area. Out of nowhere, they hear this incredibly loud, inhuman scream, so my dad slammed on the brakes, and they both just started freaking out. When suddenly, a 6-foot-tall coyote, walking on its back 2 legs with a black and white striped tail, just suddenly appeared on the side of the road and proceeded to walk in front of the car. Now, as soon as it passed and we kept going, that same scream played again, only this time it was even louder. Yeah, dad slammed on the accelerator and they got the hell out of there. Yeah, as anyone would. That's terrifying. I don't drive too often, but when I do, I'm pretty terrified of woods and just being in a dark area. No way. Number 5, New Mexico Patrol. In Hunt for the Skinwalker, a 2018 film directed by Jeremy Corbell, George Knapp and Colm Kelleher dive into the stories of those who supposedly came into contact with skinwalkers near Native American tribal lands. Now, one account was this New Mexico Highway Patrol officer. He says he saw a skinwalker on 2 separate occasions. The first time, he saw a creature wearing a white mask just appear next to his window, seemingly attaching itself to the car door, running beside the vehicle, keeping pace at highway speeds. Just like that account earlier, right? It's all starting to make more sense. A few days later, and around the same area, he encountered the creature once again. Now, what makes this tale even more intriguing is that at least one other officer claimed to have seen the same masked being while patrolling the same area. So, take it with a grain of salt, but it's pretty believable. Number 4, The Beast. July 2004, New Mexico. I had my first and only encounter with a skinwalker. Now before this, I used to say, I'll believe it when I see it. Well, I'm a believer now. The story is amazing. Already I'm like, yes, you know how to send an email. What I saw was not full human nor full animal. I was moving with my young son and we had called it a night. We were heading to our new place. Now as we walked out the front door, I saw a figure move from behind my neighbor's car to a nearby tree that stood between our apartments. It didn't have red glowing eyes, snarling teeth, or rotten smell, but it did move quickly, but not quick enough to avoid the light from a nearby light post and then a nearby set of porch lights. It didn't look at me or come towards me. It moved as if it was trying to avoid being seen. I was within 15 feet of it, but I did not look back to fully inspect it. What I saw was a wolf-like animal that sort of resembled the Beast in Beauty and the Beast, just, not cartoonish this time around. It had brown fur that completely covered it, like a very large wolf. Again, similarities to what we saw earlier, heard about earlier. My brother-in-law insists that it wasn't a skinwalker because I would have never seen it. To this day, I can picture what it looked like, and I know they exist, and I pray I never encounter one again. Yeah, I pray I never encounter one ever. Number 3, Close Coyote. This didn't happen to me, but a very close friend of mine. Okay, that's what everyone says, eh? Oh, this is a friend of mine. Didn't happen to me, just a close friend. I've heard a lot about coyotes and skinwalkers and had a weird experience or two with coyotes, but never anything paranormal, so to speak. Patrick's story, however, kept me from going back to a favorite back county secret stash. He had been camping there a couple days and said there was a coyote that always seemed to be close by, like in his peripheral vision almost, but never fully really there. He loaded up his truck and began to drive down the fire road, and at the end of the road he could see the coyote still following him. Now when he pulled onto another road, it was running next to him this time. Okay, now he's obviously freaked out, so he speeds up a bit. He said he was going 35 or so, yet still it was running along beside him. Yeah, definitely not possible. But when he looked back, the coyote was running on 2 legs and was wearing what Patrick said looked like buckskin pants. So these are all so similar. This is so terrifying. An instant later, it looked like a person wearing coyote fur keeping pace with his truck. When he looked again, it was gone, just like that. We never went back to the Grove after that day. Yeah, rightfully so, stay away from that. I don't know what that is, but that's a big nope. It's a big nope for me. Number 2, Highway 89. This one's from the world of Reddit, from username SuperDave. Yeah, nice. It's not an anonymous one like the last 4. This is good. This post has gained popularity and it's about 4 years old now. The post says, my wife and I were driving up through northern Arizona on Highway 89 between Flagstaff and Page. It was 1 a.m. and a little up the ways, I see a few sets of glowing eyes. So I let off the gas trying to avoid hitting an animal, of course, and when we passed, we saw several coyotes on the side of the road. And then one of them started running next to the car, probably 20 feet off the shoulder of the road. I floored it and then looked over and it stood up on its hind legs. There's a nightmare. Once again, hind leg trouble. That's the only way to describe it, they go on. And it kept at a pace with us for a couple of seconds before turning away from the road and disappearing. This was 20 years ago and we still rarely talk about it. I have like goosebumps in the back of my neck now. That's horrible. And finally, number 1, first Skinwalker tale. The Navajo Witch Purge of 1878. We can't forget this when talking about sightings or stories. We have to remember the real history back in the mid-1800s. This was when so many people were moving across and onto native lands, and sadly, after a series of disagreements and even wars with the US Army, the Navajo were sadly expelled from their land and forced to retreat to Fort Sumner in New Mexico. This is now referred to as the Long Walk of the Navajo in 1864. Numbers decreased fast. This new home was full of nothing but bad water, failed crops, and death. It was horrible. Now finally, after 4 years, the government finally admitted that they had made a mistake, and the Navajo were allowed to return to their homeland in the Four Corners area of the United States. Now during these years, many tribe members were said to have turned to shape-shifting to escape the terrible conditions they lived in, while the rest of the tribe were convinced that their gods had simply abandoned them. Some powers included with these skinwalkers were reading minds, controlling thoughts, and causing disease and or illness. So let's leave people in their land the fuck alone. Sounds good? Awesome, sounds good. Hit that thumbs up. What a great lesson to end on. Let's do that. Those are the top 10 scary real humans that might be skinwalkers. I'm your host, Taylor McWaters. See you next time on Most Amazing Top 10. Peace. Alright, halfway there. Whew. How's the framing here? We're good. I'm like casually growing back taller. I'm like, oh no, here we go. But number 7, campfire sighting.